I visited a haunted brothel in Pompeii. What haunting secrets lurked in the ashes? I never should have opened that door. That was my first thought as I stepped into the crumbling remains of the brothel in Pompeii. It loomed there, shrouded in shadows and whispers, a place where pleasure met despair long ago. The air hung heavy with a scent I couldn't place, something sweet yet rotten, like memories clinging to decay. My heart raced. My palms sweat. It was supposed to be a simple trip, a chance to delve into history. Instead, I stood in a chamber where walls still echoed with the laughter of lost souls, echoes of old pleasures turned grim. How could I have known these ancient bricks held dark secrets? Every inch of the place felt alive. The darkness wrapped around me, thick and suffocating. Flickering shadows danced across the rough-hewn stone, shapes that twisted and turned in unsettling ways. I strained to listen. Was that a whisper? Or just the wind? I felt my chest tighten. Suddenly, a loud bang shattered the silence. A wooden bench I hadn't touched lurched sideways as if someone had pushed it from behind. My breath caught. I looked around. Empty. Just me, and an insatiable dread curling in my stomach. My fingers trembled, brushing against the cool surface of the walls, tracing the faded murals of lovers entwined in endless ecstasy. But there was something off. Their eyes, they seemed to follow me, hollow and knowing, as if warning me to leave. I took a step back, my shoes scuffing against the ground, the sound disturbingly loud in the oppressive quiet. The whispers grew, swirling in the corners of my mind, urging me to flee, yet I couldn't move. This was Historia, moment in time frozen and shrouded in mystery. But then came another noise, sharp and unmistakable, a soft giggle that sent chills racing down my spine. Who was laughing? I turned slowly, my heart drumming like a warning bell. Just shadows. Or were they? A shudder rattled through me. The shadows lengthened, crept closer, becoming something more than darkness. My instincts screamed at me to get out, but curiosity kept me rooted. What secrets did this place hold? Suddenly, a door slammed somewhere behind me. The echoes clashed with my heartbeat. I jolted, my breath hitching in my throat as the room plunged into silence. My skin prickled. Something was watching me. Something terrifying. I squinted into the thick darkness, trying to decipher what lay ahead. And that's when I saw a figure, just beyond the edge of the light, standing still as death. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I stepped back instinctively, my heart pounding as the figure remained motionless. Was it a trick of the light, or had my eyes betrayed me? I strained to quell my rising panic, unwilling to believe I had become a casualty of this cursed place. But the unease that tightened in my chest told a different story. The figure, shrouded in a shimmery veil of darkness, was unmistakably human. I blinked rapidly, willing the shadows to coalesce into clarity, but they only deepened. I could feel its gaze boring into me, a weight that pressed upon my skin, suffocating and alien. Then, without a sound, it began to melt away, dissolving into the darkness from which it had emerged. Gulping down a rush of adrenaline, I turned to make my escape, but the door I had entered through was gone, swallowed by the very walls that had held centuries of sin. Fear twisted in my gut, a serpentine dread that slithered into my very bones. I was trapped in a mausoleum of desires turned to ash. The walls seemed to constrict around me. The whispers returned, louder now, a cacophony that sounded like ancient lamentations snaking through the crooked halls. I pressed my palms against my ears, trying to block them out, but the sound seeped into my mind like a thick, choking fog. Each breath became labored, every heartbeat felt like a countdown to some impending doom. I was an intruder in a realm that demanded payment. From the corner of my vision, a flicker of movement, more shadows gathering, a writhing mass at the edge of my consciousness. Panic surged, and I stumbled backward, my hand brushing against the cold surface. My heart raced. It was a mirror, blackened with grime, a perfect reflection of the chaos swirling inside me. I looked closer, my breath hitching as the surface rippled. A face emerged me face, yet twisted and distorted, nightmare etched in every feature. It grinned wickedly, its eyes dark voids, brimming with malice that sent shivers crashing down my spine. My mouth moved, screaming, but no sound came out. I was alone in this echo chamber of horrors, unable to escape even my own reflection. Just as I turned to flee, the sound of low laughter echoed through the chamber again, so close, yet unbearably far. The laughter morphed into something more sinister, drifting back to me like a taunt. I glanced over my shoulder and was met not only by the reflection now writhing in agony, but by shadows darting behind me, their forms slipping between the dilapidated furniture. The hair on the back of my neck bristled. I had to run. I could feel their presence, insatiable and hungry. But where? The dark swallowed everything, each path murky and foreboding. I dashed deeper into the brothel, each footstep reverberating as the shadows followed. I stumbled into a larger room, the remnants of faded tapestries engulfing the walls, their colors bled dry and whispering the stories of the past. Suddenly, the sadness turned palpable, the stench of decay mixing with something floral but sickening, like perfume left too long on a corpse. In the center of the room was a peculiar altar, adorned with moth-eaten flowers and dusty trinkets, insignias of a world that danced long before my time. And there, sprinkled around the altar, were dozens of small bones, brittle and yellowed, as if the very essence of these people had been reduced to offerings. That I stumbled back in horror, but not before I felt a clawing presence at my throat, chills wrapping around me like an iron grip. In that very moment, I saw the figure again, more defined now, standing just beyond the altar. It wore the tattered remains of what once might have been a beautiful gown, its eyes glistening with an otherworldly light. They seemed to beckon to me, pulling me closer even as I fought to turn away. Its mouth opened, releasing a sound that was not just a whisper, it was a scream flooding with despair and darkness. And just when I thought I could break free, I felt the cold press of fingers against my shoulder. I froze, the breath leaving my body, and turned slowly to face the frozen gaze of 1,000 aching souls staring back. From the shadows, "Wait, who's that behind you?" As I turned, terror gripped me tighter than any chain could. The room spun, reality warping as the shadows leaped and morphed with a life of their own, solidifying into human forms, their hollow eyes fixated upon me. The figure was not alone. Behind me, dozens of tortured souls emerged, pale and ghostly, their mouths agape in silent screams, their bodies stained with the bruises of countless experiences. "Help us!" A voice rasped, barely a whisper but heavy with sorrow, coming from a woman whose face was a mask of anguish. Her hands were outstretched, fingers contorted in a desperate plea, yet they looked as if they could shatter into dust at a moment's notice. A chill washed over me, deeper than fear, settling in my chest like a stone. Each apparition around me seemed to pull at the strings of my heart, drawing me closer to their lamentation. I could hardly stand, the weight of their sorrow pinning me to the floor. The scent of decay thickened, heavier than before, mingling with the floral notes that twisted in the air, as if death itself was trying to entice me with remnants of past beauty. As I staggered back to the altar, the haunting echo of laughter returned, this time muffled as though it were buried somewhere deep beneath a layer of ash and despair. It taunted me, teasing me with the knowledge of their tragedies. Each ghostly form was a reminder of unfulfilled lives and promises whispered into the desolation of antiquity, a hidden tapestry woven with the threads of agony. But the most horrifying realization dawned upon me: the souls weren't merely seeking release, they were seeking vengeance. I felt their eyes bore into me, dark and unforgiving as they circled closer, their faces lifting in grotesque mimicry of Lithia nightmare where anguish roamed free. "Bring her back!" cried a sudden voice from the din, a man's figure breaking from the throng with urgency in his eyes, reflective of my own panic. "You have to help us!" He lunged forward, but the shadows swallowed him back, leaving only an echo of desperation rattling through the room. Panic ignited a blaze of instinct. I had to find a way out. I turned back to the altar, hoping to discover something anything that might help. But the dark tendrils of despair clung to me, pulling me deeper into their twisted embrace. The altar pulsed ominously, a heartbeat echoing through the quiet, alive with the energy of countless souls. Suddenly, a low rumble surging through the ground beneath my feet shook me. The walls rattled as if the house itself was alive, the structure groaning in agony. My mind raced. I needed to escape this nightmare, but the only exit had vanished into shadows. Then I caught a glimpse of something lurking within the altar's shimmer, beckoning amidst the withered flowers and bones that seemed to writhe with a life of their own. It was a small, ancient key, glimmering with an unearthly light, seemingly unscathed by time. The frantic whispers grew louder, turning into a clamor. "Take it!" They shrieked in unison, their spectral hands reaching out in a frenzied grasp. But as I reached towards it, a sudden scream tore through the din, a wail, a cry of pure anguish that sent chills darting through my body. The very fabric of the room shifted, and the shadows shrieked as one, merging into thick tendrils that writhed toward me, threatening to consume anything in their path. With all my strength, I lunged for the key just as a freezing grip encircled my wrist, dragging my hand back cruelly. I felt the sharp cold of death clawing at my soul, willing me to surrender. The shadows twisted, contorting into forms I recognized, lost souls, former inhabitants of this brothel, their faces twisted in agony as they screamed to be free. But I was ensnared, a pawn in their game, my blood turned to ice by dread. Then, amidst the chaos, a horrific screech erupted as the figure in the tattered gown re-emerged, its face now a mask of rage. "You disturbed the eternal," it snarled, its voice a blend of despair and darkness, "and shall pay the price." Just as I felt my very essence begin to fray, my own reflection broke from the shadows, liberated from the mirror's grasp, and lunged forward. It held the key now, its otherworldly grin shining like a beacon of malice. "Who will you choose?" it hissed, and with that, the world around me began to unravel, spiraling towards an unspeakable ending. As the room spiraled, the air thickening around me like a suffocating cloak, I could hear my heartbeat drumming in my ears. The shadows tightened their grip, the creaks and moans of the house sounding like the mournful lament of its many tormented occupants. I felt their energy swell intense and desperate, clawing at the threads of my consciousness, yearning for the release I could not fathom giving. The dark figure that wore my face was now a storm of chaos, laughing as it brandished the key, its hollow eyes gleaming with a sinister glow. "Your choice, dear," it crooned mockingly, "live or die, salvation or damnation. Which will it be?" In that moment, the agony in the room intensified, a chorus of pain that raised the very hairs on my neck. The other spirits shrieked as one, the ground beneath me pulsing with despair, reverberating their torment directly into my bones. "Help us! Save us!" they begged, their wails silencing reason, drowning out the inherent madness my doppelganger exuded. Glimpses of their past lives flickered in front of my eyes, frantic moments stolen by the brothel's cruel embrace, lovers torn apart, whispers of betrayal echoing through the corridors. I could see them each soul, vying for attention, vying for a savior amidst the twisted legacy of lust and revenge. "Do it!" hissed the shadowy figure. "Unlock the door to oblivion!" It thrust the key closer, the shadows behind it writhing with anticipation. "Get away from me!" I shuddered, instinctively backing away, though the very walls seemed to shift, trapping me closer to this nightmare. The shadows retaliated, lashing out with a force that felt like ice against my skin. Suddenly, the ground gave a violent shake, the fabric of the world trembling as a frigid gust swept through the room. I caught a glimpse of the door far away, shrouded in darkness, whispering promises of terror but also hope. The apparitions wailed louder, their outstretched hands turning towards it, unrelenting in their plea. "Release us! Lead us to where shadows fear to tread! Take the key!" I could sense the ancient energy of the key pulsing rhythmically, calling to me like a siren. It shimmered, a beacon against the dark, and for a fleeting moment, I saw spectral tendrils waver in fear, tremors of something darker yet undiscovered. But the laughter of my ghastly twin echoed, relentless and inviting. As I hesitated, the wailing stopped, swallowed by a haunting silence that suffocated the room. Choose! Boomed a voice from somewhere unfathomable, its fury shaking the air. My reflection had turned temperamental, fury spilling from its lips, gnashing teeth sharp enough to pierce the veils between realms. With my heart pounding in my chest, I finally lunged towards the key, fingers brushing its cool surface, and erupted into a split-second vision of unfathomable darkness, a void that seemed to swallow existence whole. In that instant, faces flashed before me, friends, family, even strangers I had brushed shoulders with a lifetime ago. Each one melted into screams as the shadows surrounded them, looming closer in an unholy dance, and I could taste the sharp tang of fear upon my tongue. But the moment was shattered. A sharp pain shot through my wrist as the grotesque figure tightened its grip, dragging me back into the suffocating darkness, where a banquet of horror awaited. Not yet, it hissed, a cruel satisfaction lacing its words. You think you have control? The truth is hidden beneath layers of torment, and we are but players in a game you never knew you entered. I twisted and thrashed, the ghosts screaming for their release, but with each moment, I sank further into the abyss of dread. It was then I perceived the walls around me engorged by darkness, the very essence of despair leaking from the slits in the wood, coalescing into grotesque shapes that reached out with gnarled fingers, pulling and tearing at my skin like hungry wolves. Choose, the darkness seethed. But be warned, your choice is not your own. And just as terror seized me fully, the last sensation I registered was the pull of the key, the violent shock of cold merging with warm blood. It all tore apart at once, disintegrating my understanding of what was real, and in the blink of an eye, everything went black. When I awoke, I was somewhere else, adrift in a hazy hallucination, where laughter twisted into moans and light fractured like promises left unfulfilled. I was not alone, but amidst a throng of shadows, features blurred, yet the eyes remained, burning into my very soul. And then, amidst the cacophony, a new voice emerged, deep, resonant, carrying an unfathomable weight. It whispered, "You've entered the wrong game." Suddenly, from the depths of the haunted chorus, I saw it again, that familiar figure, rising from blackness, and with it, the horrifying realization that my escape was never meant to be. I floated aimlessly, suspended in a realm where time and reason unraveled. The disembodied voices intertwined with the malevolent laughter that had echoed throughout my soul. They beckoned me closer, yet I understood their intent was laced with malice, their hollow words coated in thinly veiled deception. Join us, they murmured, a chilling chant that pulsed between the shadows. Embrace the truth, let the pain wash over you, like ash from a dying volcano. A grin widened across the face of the doppelganger. Its grin grew impossibly large, stretching to the edges of madness. I could feel its hunger towards my own soul, and the sensation was sickening. As I searched for the light that had evaporated into the darkness, I noticed other figures like wisps of smoke-given form hovering in a grotesque pantomime of reality. Each figure moved in spirals, their limbs twisted in unnatural positions, both grotesque and mesmerizing. They clung to the cracked walls of this woeful realm, faces reminiscent of despairing lovers, tragic heroes, and tortured souls screaming for deliverance. They all bore an intense longing, as if they yearned for a piece of me to fill their void. One must die for another to live, the haunting melody wove through the air, a grim reminder of the price one must pay for salvation. I recognized the sentiment from before, echoing the spirits from the BROTHEL, a sinister transaction that played with the lives of the unsuspecting. I took a step forward, enticed by the warm glow of an ethereal light that flickered teasingly in the distance. It pulsed steadily, illuminating the shadows, creating eyes of bewilderment within the black. Each step threatened to draw me deeper into their nightmarious cycle of endless suffering. "Where am I?" I cried, the desperation spilling forth like blood from a wound. Glimmering moments of past desires, a voice slithered through the shadows, startlingly familiar yet foreign. Suddenly, I spotted her, a woman from the ruins of the brothel. Her skin glistened with ash, eyes wide with sorrowful knowing, breasts crushed by grief and twisted memories of betrayal. "You search for answers while we are mere fragments, lost in shadows and screams," she lamented, an echo of flames illuminating her outline. "Who is the keeper of the key?" I asked, my heart thundering as I fought against the encroaching despair. "I must know!" She turned slowly towards me, her face flickering between anguish and a strange, hollow calm. The key unlocks more than just doors, it opens wounds that refuse to heal. The keeper, if they exist, plays no part but to watch the destruction unfold. A sudden chill washed over me, a bone-deep cold that made the breath hitch in my throat. I felt the darkness pulse hungry. The air thickened, shadows growing denser, spiraling around me like a tempest. I recalled the key in my dream, its otherworldly glow pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. Could I seek it out again, or was it merely a cruel illusion? Run! The woman shouted suddenly, her voice splintering the haze. Before it finds you. Dread awaits. Before I understood fully, a piercing scream shattered the air, and shadows shifted. I spun, the darkness coiling like a serpent, revealing forms too grotesque to comprehend, mouths agape, revealing rows of glistening teeth, eyes swollen with delight over my imminent demise. Here they gathered, grotesque figures, swirling in a maddening dance of hunger. Join us, they howled, in a cacophony that overwhelmed my senses. You are ours now. Panic surged from somewhere primal as the figures churned, clawing and gripping hungrily. I threw myself backward, against the groaning walls that pulsed with dread, gasping for a glimmer of freedom. The laughter grew, swelling like the tide it would consume all, that I was sure. Heart racing, I stumbled toward the glimmering light, the only visible path in the oppressive dark. No, 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 I pleaded with the shadows that grasped wildly. My feet propelled me, desperation igniting my motion, until with a final lunge, I entered the light. It enveloped me, warmth flooding my veins. Yet in this moment of perceived safety, shadows still gripped my ankles, tauntingly pulling me back into their labyrinth of despair. The voices rose around me, tearing at the edges of comprehension, the darkness laughing, cascading into fits of lunacy. Your salvation is the end. It roared, echoing, bouncing off the walls with an insatiable hunger. The shimmering light began to dim, flickering like a dying flame, and I could see just beyond its borders faces pressing against an invisible glass, pleading, screaming, and sobbing in a chorus of forgotten promises. And then, against the backdrop of their torment, I felt the key slip from my grasp, falling away into the endless dark. Silently I froze, watching as shadows converged, engulfing it in a frenzy of gnashing teeth and demonic laughter, swirling away into the abyss where I could never follow. Welcome back, the disjointed voices whispered, the game has only just begun. And in that moment, as the light flickered out entirely, I realized the real game was no longer about choosing, it was about survival. The silence that followed was deafening, a void that swallowed every lingering whisper of hope. My body trembled violently, the realization crashing over me like a wave of ice-cold water. I was ensnared in a purgatory of betrayal, unable to escape the darkness that demanded my surrender. The absence of light left an unsettling emptiness, but the shadows were alive, writhing with a malevolence that delighted in my despair. Something deep within me screamed to flee, but every instinct was twisted by the infernal grip of the darkness. As my eyes strained to adjust to the blackness, I was acutely aware of the grotesque forms looming just beyond my reach, amorphous shapes that twisted and contorted in perpetual hunger. Your choices echo, little one, a voice crooned softly from the gloom, supremely confident and maliciously patient. It slithered through the air like smoke, curling around my mind, probing at my thoughts. What will you sacrifice for freedom? For truth? I clutched my head, fighting against the alluring lure of the voice. Memories surged through my mind, faces of those I had lost, shadows of previous choices that had led me here. I could feel the weight of their expectations resting on my shoulders like a shroud, urging me to reclaim the agency that I had fought so hard to maintain. With trembling legs, I dared to step further into the obsidian abyss. Soft echoes flitted just beyond my hearing, promising both salvation and ruin. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs, each beat an ominous warning against moving forward. But I had to know. The insatiable curiosity gnawed at me, demanding to be fed. Your journey intersects with despair, the voice taunted, each resonant syllable wrapping around my spine. Embrace the truth that resides within the ashes. Like a moth to a flame, you seek what will consume you. Suddenly, the ground beneath me trembled, shuddering as if alive. A low growl reverberated through the air. I recoiled, letting out a strangled gasp as tendrils of darkness lashed out, snaring my wrists with a grip that felt almost familiar. They tightened and pulled me toward the shifting forms just beyond the edges of my vision. No! Let me go! I screamed, struggling against invisible bonds, but the shadows only tugged harder, coaxing me toward a gaping maw that had appeared, blacker than the night. All around me, those ghastly faces materialized, torment etched into their features, their mouths forming silent screams that were absorbed by the greedy darkness. I began to slide backwards toward the gaping void, feeling it all at once, the despair, the dread, the all-consuming hunger for my very essence. The shadows dined on my fear, reveling in the agony that I could feel coursing through their twisted forms. Just as I felt myself drawn to the precipice of annihilation, a sudden, blinding slice of light burst up from deep within the darkness, illuminating the core of despair. The silhouettes recoiled, their screeches exploding into a cacophony of horror. "What is that?" I shouted, my voice drowning under the waves of terror. From the heart of the light, a figure emerged, silhouetted but unmistakably beautiful, a celestial beacon amidst chaos. As the outline solidified, I gasped. It was the woman from my visions, the one from the brothel, her features more ethereal and haunting now than I remembered. "Be strong," she whispered, her voice breaking through the tumult as though it were a golden thread anchoring me to sanity. "You must resist their pull. The keepers shall never take what you do not willingly offer." With renewed determination, I tore my gaze from the dark maw, bolstered by the light within her eyes. It sparked a flame in the depths of my soul, igniting a determination to fight against the encroaching abyss. But as the darkness recoiled, I felt a new weight. The shadows began to whisper secrets of my past, memories more powerful than chains. Do you remember him? They hissed, plucking at my vulnerability. "The one you left behind. The one who died because of you." "No!" I roared, but their insidious suggestions slithered deeper, burrowing into my mind. Memories rolled through me, visions of a handsome face, the laughter that seemed so innocent against a backdrop of betrayal and anguish. "I did it to protect him," I shouted into the darkness, but it merely laughed, a sinister guffaw that echoed endlessly, taunting me. They clawed at my mind, seizing hold of my guilt, erupting into relentless accusations that spiraled into madness. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw the light flicker and dim, the woman's ethereal form wavering, dimming under the weight of the encroaching shadows. "You have to make a choice," she implored, stretching out her hand as if to reach me, but the distance felt insurmountable. "Let her go!" I shouted, my voice cracking as the shadows tugged me toward the abyss, demanding my surrender in a blood-curdling crescendo. The darkness surged forward, desperate to consume the light that was slipping away. And just as I strengthened my resolve to resist, the ground beneath me gave way entirely. Plummeting downward into the void, I heard the woman call out one last chilling warning: "The key you seek is not lost, but the price will be far greater than you can fathom." And just before the darkness swallowed me whole, I felt the cold sting of terror clawing at my consciousness. The realization that the game of sacrifice was about to begin anew, not just for me, but for every soul trapped inside this pit of despair. Then, everything went black. Echoes of an unfathomable darkness enveloped me, stretching out into an abyss where time and space twisted in grotesque confusion. The sensation of falling morphed into a sensation of stasis, as if I floated suspended between realms. Weights of memories wrapped around me, pulling me into ghostly echoes of laughter and weeping, both taunting and comforting. And then it shifted. With a violent jolt, the ground reformed beneath me, solid but grotesquely contorted, as if my presence had warped reality itself. I lay sprawled, disoriented, on a sinuous landscape that writhed with an unsettling life. The ground was dark as pitch, dotted with patches of pulsing, bioluminescent fungi in sickly shades of greens and blues. "Welcome back," a voice hissed, sultry yet dripping with malice. I spun around, heart racing, the darkness wrapping tighter around my throat. A figure emerged, a woman, enchanting yet dread-filled. Her skin seemed to crawl with shadows as if they were part of her essence. Her eyes glinted like shards of obsidian under the haunting light, reflecting a symphony of my fears. You might want to pay attention, dear, she crooned, a grin spreading across her face that twisted into something predatory. Each choice matters. More now than ever. I staggered to my feet, instinctively retreating from her. This realm felt dense, thick with regret and longing. It weighed down upon my chest, making it hard to breathe. What do you want from me? I gasped, fighting back the overwhelming tide of dread. To remember, she replied, twirling with the grace of smoke in the air. To accept your burden, the very reason you are here. She stepped closer, her fingers trailing a path through shimmering shadows, beckoning me nearer like an ill-fated siren. Do you remember those you abandoned? Their souls linger like whispers upon this land, asking for release. Stop. Please, I choked, feeling ghosts swirl at the periphery of my vision, faces marred and twisted into expressions of despair. I clenched my eyes shut, trying to shield myself from remembering each person lost reverberated through my core with an indelible anguish. Oh, but you mustn't shy away from the truth, my dear. The past waits for you to acknowledge it. Her voice snaked around me, taunting, teasing. Desperation surged within me, and I turned to flee, but the ground roared alive, reshaping the landscape into shifting corridors that trapped me, leading me ever deeper into the heart of this bleak underworld. Each step pulsed in rhythm with my racing heart even as I stumbled blindly into the encroaching gloom. Help! Someone, please! I shouted, my voice raw with desperation. The walls pulsated, exhaling soft whispers that coalesced into forms, a gallery of accusing eyes witnessing my unraveling. Help you? Echoed the seductive voice from behind, dripping with mockery. Who will help the guilty? You brought this upon them. Suddenly, the shadows began to solidify, dragging forth anguished figures that slowly confronted me from the depths of the darkness. Faces I had known, voices I had tried to forget. There was Ethan, his eyes burning with unshed tears, an unsteady tremor in his voice as he spoke my name, heavy with betrayal. Why did you leave me? He lamented. Each syllable cracked like thunder, cutting deep through my heart. I did it for you, I whimpered, crumbling inside, desperation morphing into a suffocating guilt. To protect you. I never wanted this. Protect? He echoed, the very darkness around us mocking. You condemned me. A visceral horror gripped me as tendrils of darkness slithered around Ethan, pulling him back into the void, leaving only the echo of his anguish. I was left trembling, heart racing, gasping for justification in a realm that demanded penance. The choice is yours, the enchanting woman purred, reappearing at my side. This suffering can end. You simply have to embrace the truth. What will you sacrifice to save them? My breath quickened. I felt the garbled memories of the past gnaw at my sanity, pulling me toward the brink of an abyss deeper than ever before. But among the echoes I sensed something else stirring, a primal shadow waiting within the darkness to be unleashed. With every flicker of hope extinguished within me, the weight of my terrible choice loomed ever larger, and just as I opened my mouth to voice a desperate decision, the ground below convulsed violently. A darkness surged forth, sprawling in thick fingers of shadow clawing up toward the surface, whispering promises in a language long forgotten. I could feel the warmth of life dimming, the air thickening with despair, and suddenly a new voice emerged from the depths, chilling me to the bone. Welcome, welcome, ready to play? Screams erupted around me as I was ensnared once more, the familiar faces reappearing in a sickening kaleidoscope of tormented souls. Lights began to flicker, the shroud around us lifting to reveal one final truth. The monstrous entity behind it all, hungry and impatient, just waited for my next choice to unfold. Then, all at once, I was pulled down, spiraling as the earth beneath fractured, and the enormity of that horror left me breathless. The darkness within me stirred, tearing at my very will, and as I screamed into the void, I realized with dreadful certainty that my salvation might just become the key to a far greater horror. And in that moment of shattering despair, I felt the floor give way completely, plunging me into the heart of that dark antition infinite hunger that awaited my submission. The plunge into the abyss left me breathless, suspended in a space void of time. I felt the weight of shadows pressing against my torso, restricting each desperate gulp of air. It leached warmth from my bones, turning my skin to ice. My thoughts erupted into chaos, a cacophony of screams intertwined with the whispers of the damned. I landed with a shuddering impact, crashing against a floor that felt wet and slick beneath my fingers. The air reeked of sulfur, and a rancid dampness exuded from the cracked stonework surrounding me. I pushed myself upright, squinting in the sparse light that flickered like a dying star. Where am I? I stammered, my voice echoing unnaturally, as if mocking me. Silently, I rose to my feet. The ambience was filled with a wrongness, an unsettling sense of being watched, as if the very walls breathed my fear in. Then, I began to discern shapes moving in the shadows, figures congregating, their outlines shifting like smoke, morphing into forms too grotesque to recognize. A string of muffled laughter scuttled through the air, brushing against my eardrums, each chuckle sharp and like nails across stone. Among them, I heard familiar voices, hushed tones that carried memories threaded through with dread. "You can't escape, can you?" they sighed, reverberating through the gloom. "The truth will never set you free. It will devour you whole," they warned in unison, their mouths moving yet devoid of features, their faces nothing more than blank voids. Heart racing, I pivoted to flee, but found myself ensnared in the shadows, each tendril wrapping tighter, pulling me back into the suffocating darkness. I struggled, but it was as if I were drowning in this spectral sea. The horrific forms advanced, clawing at the air with elongated, grotesque fingers. "Embrace your shame," they hissed, circling me as their laughter crescendoed, a malicious symphony echoing in my ears. "You buried them deep, but they still come for you. Just as they came for us. Shut up!" I shouted, desperation boiling over. Yet, they only laughed harder, an echoing chorus of torment that sent chills racing through my spine. Suddenly, the surroundings quaked violently, the walls pulsing like an entity alive, responding to my cries. A rift tore through the auditory veil, dropping me deep into chaos. Suddenly, spectral arms stretched outward. I could feel them grazing my skin, tugging at my clothes, attempting to pull me into unseen depths where they dwelled. "Stay with us," they pleaded, their fingers clammy against my flesh, stinging like ice. "You were never meant to let go." Just then, a figure emerged from the whirlwindish shadow clothed in luminous white. As it stepped from the haze, the tumult stilled, and the gathering darkness retreated. I squinted, unsure of what lay before me. "Do you remember me?" the figure whispered, a ghostly semblance of warmth contrasting sharply against the chill that surrounded me. My heart danced with apprehension. It was Clara, lost among the turmoil when the world fell to ash.my memories swirled echoes of laughter and sorrow, sights and sounds intertwined. "Clara?" I whispered, barely believing my eyes. "How is this? Can't you see what this place truly is?" She trembled, her voice imbued with a weary sorrow. "The heart of your guilt. It feeds on your past." Her eyes, once warm and inviting, now shimmered with an ethereal light, full of dread and something darker. "No, I can't stay here," I half cried. "I'd give anything to forget." "You're not real, are you so certain?" she countered, a slight, mournful smile playing on her lips. Behind her, I could see the writhing dark shadows retreating, hungrily watching but unable to breach the flickering boundary of her light. "They only seek what you have denied. This place is a mirror to your soul." In that moment, clarity struck like a thunderclap. Clara held the power to shield me, but I could sense that the darkness remained poised, waiting. The air throbbed with tension. "Join them, or watch them wither away," she warned, her gaze boring into mine, steady yet full of anguish. "The echoes will not remain silent forever." As desperation clawed at my insides, I could feel the swell of the shadows creeping closer, hungry for my despair, for an offering. I fumbled for words, my voice trembling on the precipice of revelation, when a sudden, chilling scream erupted from the void, shattering the stillness. The rattle of chains echoed, a grotesque laughter rippling through the shadows. The figure surged forward, lunging for me, but Clara's light flared brightly, illuminating the horrors with curious clarity. "Make your choice," she implored, anguish weaving through her voice. "But no, if you do not fight, they will claim you." With dread coiling in my heart, reality began to splinter and warp. The choice lay before me, teetering on a razor's edge, with the figures flickering at the threshold of despair. Then, from behind Clara, I felt a rush of cold air sweep through. The shadows trembled, hissing as an eruption of roars filled the air. I turned to see a monstrous silhouette rising from the darkness, eyes piercing through the very fabric of existence, a being that transcended any horror I had ever encountered. Just as I opened my mouth to cry out, the figure lunged forth, and the world melted into blackness. Awareness flickered back to life like an unstable flame, but instead of the suffocating blackness, I found myself engulfed in a searing light. I lay sprawled on a stone floor, the warmth of the sun illuminating pale, skeletal hands reaching upwards from cracks in the ancient tiles. Glistening dust motes danced precariously above me, and the scent of decay mingled with the sweet aromas of something old, something dear, yet mournful. I jolted upright, my heart hammering against my ribs as I scanned the disorienting expanse around me. I was no longer ensnared in the clutches of spectral figures, but rather, I had been transported somewhere far stranger, a place that hummed with a heavy, lingering energy. The grand structure that loomed before me appeared to be an ancient brothel, perched at the edge of the Pompeii ruins, echoes of pleasure long since buried in my breath caught as remnants of laughter, whispers of indulgence stitched into the very air, beckoned me closer. Perhaps the whispers were memories or even remnants of a life lived long ago. Was this place yet another reflection of my guilt? Or perhaps was there something darker concealed within its inviting facade? Fingers trembling, I lifted myself fully to my feet. The walls, adorned with faded frescoes depicting acts of lewd abandon, whispered secrets buried beneath layers of soot and sorrow. I ventured deeper into the hall, drawn curiously down a corridor lined with heavy velvet curtains that billowed gently, as if unseen breaths swept through them. Each flicker of the sunlight cast strange shadows that lingered too long, turned about in baleful mockery of my presence. "Who's there?" I called out, a futile challenge against the silencia question swallowed by the embrace of forgotten tales. With every creak of the worn floorboards, the air thickened, an unsettling sensation prickling at the back of my neck. I could almost feel eyes hidden behind the fabric, watching, judging, each heartbeat resonating as a tolling bell in an empty cathedral. I hesitated before drawing aside a curtain, revealing a small room suffused with dim, flickering light. The air sparked with an electricity that snaked through the atmosphere. A circular stone bed, draped in crimson silk, beckoned beneath an ornate mirror tarnished by time. It framed something in its depths, a swirling mist, an echo of the past. Idly, my fingers brushed against it, and the reflection twisted, revealing glimmers of ghostly figures wrapped in ecstasy. Then, a sensation of being pulled backward gripped my mind, forcing my gaze through the mirror. My heart seized in terror as I saw the darkness that lay beyond a vile, undulating mass of shadows, writhing and grasping, straining against invisible chains, yearning for release. But among them, I caught sight of a figure I recognized, Clara's ghostly image, her twisted expression a mix of despair and raw agony, trapped within their thrall. "Help us!" Her voice echoed through the glassy surface, distorted yet poignant. "You must break the cycle. This place feeds on your regret and your fears. Do not give in." I stumbled back, fear flooding my senses as I turned to leave, desperate to escape the hall of echoes. As I reached for the curtain, it whipped back with unnatural force, revealing a shadowy figure standing there, head hung low, a smirk creeping across its lips. "Leaving so soon?" It crooned, voice like velvet dipped in poison. "But you've only just arrived. Don't you want to play?" Fear coiled tightly in my stomach as I skirted past it, my mind racing with chaotic thoughts. I felt its presence looming behind me, curling around my body, a lover turned predator. "You think you're going to escape your past? It follows you, little soul. Even here, in this house of regret." I stumbled, my foot catching against an unseen protrusion, and I fell forward, crashing to the floor. The shadows responded, swirling around me, nibbling at the edges of my consciousness. Sparks of pain pulsed through my back as I rolled onto my side, leveraging myself against the ancient stone, and that was when I heard it. Unmistakable sound of chains rattling above me. A sickening dread coalesced in the pit of my stomach as droplets of sweat streamed down my temples. I looked up, and a darkened form loomed over me, its bat-like wings poised to form shadowed bounds. The creature dropped from the ceiling as if released from the chains of time, shadows melting around its figure as it landed silently. Its eyes, twin voids that seemed to consume light, fixed upon mine, drowning me in a wave of unparalleled horror. "End it," it rasped softly, voice a sibilant echo from the abyss. "Or join us in the depths forever." I froze, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of my choices weighing heavily on my shoulders. A heartbeat echoed in the stillness, and then, as if sensing my hesitance, the creature lunged forward, its maw extending to engulf me. I barely managed a gasp as I prepared to scream, my mind racing to find an escape when thud. Light shattered around me, and the wall collapsed in an avalanche of dust and stone, sending a shockwave through the room. My instincts propelled me forward, into the primal darkness. As I barreled through the opening, a chorus of voices erupted from the rubble, a cacophony of despair reclaiming the void. Behind me, the creature's piercing shriek cut through the air, filling the space with an icy terror, shattering the last vestiges of sanity. The world around me began to blur, a storm of faces and shadows swirling in a dark ballet. But I could feel the grip of something cold wrapping around my ankles, a spectral hand latching onto my flesh. I fought against it, scrambling through the cascading debris. But the darkness refused to relent, pulling me back into its gaping maw. I could hear Clara's muffled, tortured cries intertwining with the howls of the creature, a dissonant symphony, beckoning me to relinquish the fight and surrender to the abyss that awaited. My limbs begged for freedom. But as I reached for the light ahead, the shadows tightened their grip, threatening to reel me back into their hungry embrace. Time stretched, bending, warping thin. With one last, desperate shove, I lunged into the bright unknown as screams merged into silence. But rather than solace, I plunged deeper into the depths until everything turned into an overwhelming void. Only then did I realize I had escaped the brothel, but that which I feared most was not so easily left behind. As the darkness encased me, engulfing my scream, a single, chilling whisper echoed in the void, "You've only just begun." I awoke in a cold sweat, the remnants of dread coiling around me like a shroud. The stark reality hit meth brothel had vanished, replaced by a mundane bedroom, my own. It was a relief, yet as I sat upright, the chaos of the past few days whirled through my mind, a grotesque carousel of memories I couldn't shake. It felt as though I had returned from the depths of a nightmare, but I was still ensnared by the haunting laughter from the shadows of the brothel, a growing whisper at the edges of my consciousness. I glanced at the bedside clock. 2:00 AM. Time felt sluggish and disjointed, like a film stuck on pause. I closed my eyes tightly, willing the darkness away. It was over. I had escaped. But the faces, their screams, and Clara's warning, the key unlocks more than just doors. What did that mean? With an uneasy sigh, I swung my legs over the side of the bed, an attempt to anchor myself back to reality. That instinct was short-lived. As my feet touched the floor, an unmistakable chill rippled through the air. I felt it crawl over me, snaking its way beneath my skin, a familiar sensation, a haunting déjà vu. Suddenly, I heard Ida's soft giggle, sweet yet laced with madness. My heart plummeted. It seeped from the very walls, curling ominously around me. I darted a glance at the window, half expecting to find the silhouettes from Pompeii lurking outside, but nothing waited in the shadows, only the dim glow of a street lamp flickering in the distance. "Get it together," I whispered to myself, though my voice trembled in the unsafe quiet. I grabbed my phone, eager for a tether to the outside world and normalcy, but when I tapped the screen to illuminate it, my heart dropped to my stomach. There were messages, dozens from friends, frantic and laced with confusion. "Where are you? People are worried, call me, it's urgent." As dread wrapped tighter around me, I felt a gut punch of loneliness, a sickened realization that something was inherent within the turmoil I had unleashed. The shadows had whispered promises that terrors lurked in waiting, yet when I shot out of bed, I realized I wasn't the only one disturbed by the echoes of the past. I opened my bedroom door slowly, its creaking almost inaudible as I stepped into the dimly lit hallway. Every flicker of the overhead light made me flinch, the shadows shifting and transforming into vile shapes, twisting and coiling back into the corners. I forced myself to breathe, but the air had thickened with tension as I inched towards the living room, where one of my friends had promised to stay the night, but the room lay empty, echoing only the quiet hum of the refrigerator, and then the laughter broke again, laced with an unholy joy that echoed through the space, flooding me with icy terror. "You've brought the darkness with you." It was Clara's voice, echoing like a death knell. I spun around in a panic, the shadows now closing in, creeping from every corner, as if they were alive and waiting. Then came a series of knocks, a simple act, yet it was shattered by an otherworldly resonance that sent violent chills racing down my spine. I rushed to the door, barely able to articulate the name of the friend I expected on the other side. "Tim," I willed myself to think, but then, as I approached, the knocks transformed into a haunting melody, shifting into the cadence of laughter, a chorus of tortured souls beckoning me to dance along their precipice of despair. My hand trembled as it reached for the doorknob, grasping the cold metal with a desperate longing to turn it and flee whatever awaited. "Open the door!" came an impatient voice from the other side, laced with urgency, but the laughter crescendoed, silencing the rational thought. As I gripped the knob, an icy dread unfurled in my gut, coiling tightly around my insides. What if I let it in? What if I unleashed whatever darkness had clawed its way into my reality? The door rattled with a vehemence that nearly sent me stumbling backwards. "Please let me in," Tim's voice warbled, desperate and shaky. Each second that passed felt like an eternity. Shadows coiled around me, their whispers clawing into my mind. "Let him in. Join us. The darkness wants to play. No!" I shouted, refusing to succumb, but my resolve faltered with another echoing laugh, unmistakably familiar. "You think you can keep me out?" The resonance twisted, morphing into a cacophony, and I turned, dread tightening around my chest. With every horrific recollection, every ounce of guilt that had lingered from that damned brothel, reality blurred. There were voices. They were all around me, sinking into my very essence, urging me to open up, to surrender. Let him in. What if he is not what he seems? Suddenly, the laughter sharpened into Clarissa wicked grin that surged forth from the shifting shadows, tightening like a noose around my sanity. It felt strangely powerful, a force anticipating my next move. I struggled with the door, dread pooling within me as the grip of shadows enveloped my mind, uprooting the last ounce of resolve. Get away! I screamed, wrenching the door open against the roiling dark. I stumbled back, not into my living room or even into an open dano, into an abyss swirling with the faces of those who had tormented me in those ruins. Tim stood there, his face a nightmare, lingering on the precipice. But behind him was a tempest, a swirling mass, faces distorted in terror. "Help us, help yourself!" the shadow screamed, piercing through everything I believed. I stepped back, horrified, but it was too late. The darkness thrummed in response, feeding on my confusion, and before I could process the twisting depths of despair around me, the shadows surged forward, engulfing him in waves of hungry shadows, and soon after the void followed me, engulfing everything, spiraling into an unforgiving abyss. As I felt myself pulled deeper, the last thing I heard was Clara's voice, pleading desperately amidst the chaos. "You opened the door, but the keeper demands more than you've ever realized." And as I was swallowed by the void, I understood the terrifying truth. The horrors didn't merely live beyond the key, they always existed within me. The game would never end. I had merely become a part of its eternal cycle. Shadows swirled around as despair became my reality, and with a final desperate gasp, I whispered, "What have I done?" as the laughter echoed back, drowning my cries in a cacophony of insatiable longing. The door swung shut behind me, sealing the darkness away at least for now.